Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm making a 100% whole grain sourdough fruit bread. So this is going to be a cinnamon and raisin type loaf. I don't have any raisins though, so I'm just using sultanas, but you know, you'll get the idea. It is a little bit experimental, the method that I'm using, but we'll see. I'm just gonna go for it and see what happens and fix any mistakes that I make. It is quite hot here today, so this loaf is going to move really fast, like in terms of fermentation. And you really do have to watch your environment. Over fermentation is probably the number one issue that people have making 100% whole grain sourdough breads. It can really get away from you. But you'll just need to adjust your bread for your environment. Yours might be a lot slower if it's cooler where you are. Anyway, that's about it. Let's get to it. So in this loaf I'm using 500 grams of flour. I've got 400 grams of whole wheat and 100 grams of khorasan. And to that I'm adding 375 grams of cold water. I'm using cold water because my flour is freshly milled and it's a bit warm. So the cold water helps to counteract the warmth of the freshly milled flour. You don't want your dough to be too warm, especially on a hot day. So I'm just bringing this together in my KitchenAid stand mixer. You don't want to develop any gluten in this, really knead the dough. You're just bringing the flour and the water together. That's all you're doing. And we're going to soak those two together without adding any salt or starter and just let them soak for an hour, and that's going to really help the dough to develop nicely. While you're waiting though, you can add the other ingredients on the top. So I add 1¼ teaspoon of salt, and I add my starter as well, about 120 grams or half a cup, and you just pop them on the top. So the flour and the water are mixed together underneath and they will do their thing. And then you can add your other ingredients on top, all ready to go to mix in after that soak period is finished. Because they're not actually mixing in with the rest of the dough, they're not going to have any effect. So you can just sit them on top like that and then wait until you're ready. So I put a teaspoon of cinnamon in there as well, and just going to cover that and leave that for an hour. So this is after the hour. The dough underneath has had its autolyse, and now I want to mix in the rest of those ingredients. So I knead this dough in my stand mixer on speed 2, which is what's recommended for dough in these KitchenAid mixers, for 7 minutes. I find with 100% whole wheat, those types of doughs, about 7 minutes is a really good amount of mixing with the dough hook to develop the gluten structure in the dough, make it kind of nice and stretchy and elastic, and give it some strength. So that tends to work really well. I just use water on my hands to help get the dough off the hook. Wet hands, dough won't stick to wet hands, so it's a good tip. And I'm just showing you here, this dough passes the window pane test, so you can see it's got a really good gluten network developed. And now I add in my sultanas. So these have been soaked. It was originally 2/3 of a cup of dry sultanas. You can use raisins or currants or whatever you like. And this is where my experiment didn't go too well. I decided to try and mix those in, but they didn't mix in too well. So it would have been better just to fold those in by hand. Even with increasing the speed, that did not help whatsoever. So I decided to take it out, and then you'll just see I fold that in by hand. So you've probably seen this before in other videos. I never use flour on my hands or on the bench. I just find it so much easier to use water, but that is a completely personal preference. I don't live and work in a bakery, so I find the water a lot easier to clean up. Flour may be better, but I just use water. It's very easy and doesn't take much. So I'm just folding up this dough to incorporate all of those loose sultanas. You wouldn't want to mix that too much with those soft sultanas in, because they'll just rip apart You want to keep them nice and whole, and when they are soaked they're very soft, so they can tear quite easily, so it is better to be gentle and just fold them in. I left my dough to ferment for about 4 hours, but it can take a lot longer. So what if you don't have a stand mixer to knead your bread? Well, you can knead it the old-fashioned way, so it might take you a good 10, 15, even 20 minutes of hand kneading. You can just knead it without the sultanas after you've done the hortalice or the soaking, and then fold in the sultanas later on. You can also just do stretch and folds. So if you have a look at some of my other videos, you'll see I stretch and fold the dough through the bulk fermentation for the first couple of hours anyway. So you stretch up the dough and fold it in, and that will develop the strength and the gluten in the dough quite nicely as well. And then again, just fold in the sultanas a bit later. There's many ways to make a loaf of bread, so don't worry if you don't have a mixer. Just give it a try. If worst comes to worst, you don't have to knead this bread at all. You can just make it like a no-knead style bread. With the pre-soaking, the hortalice, that is going to greatly improve the texture of the bread anyway. It's going to be a lot better if it is kneaded or folded in some way, but if you don't want to do any of those things, you can still make good bread without doing that. So you can just do a no-knead version if you want to too. I hope that helps. So here we are, about 4 hours later. Make sure you watch your dough and not the clock. There are so many variables, you can't really follow recipe guides because your environment might make a very quick bread and others you will be slow. And it's your starter and all sorts of other factors as well, the flours you're using. So now we're doing the first shaping. Basically, we're just folding it up like a letter and then putting a little bit of tension into this dough. Because it was such a hot day, I'm just being a bit gentle with this. I don't want to tear it. It does have a pretty good gluten development, but whole grain sourdough loaves can be a bit more delicate, so you want to be a bit careful. So just cover that for 15 minutes and then let it rest, and it sort of goes slack again, which is great, and then it's ready to do the final shaping. This double shaping technique does help a lot. It does build more strength and structure in the dough. So this is the second and final shaping now. Just gently pull the dough out, fold it again, basically just doing the same sort of shaping again. But this time I'm going to kind of roll it up to fit in my little tin. Roll it up nice and tight, but you don't want any tearing on the top. So it's a bit of a fine balance. This little tin is pretty much filled by this dough, but that works quite well because if you've got a small tin with quite a big dough in it, you'll get a really nice high rise and a nice, people say, oh, you got a great rise on your bread, but it's actually because you put the dough in a small tin. So I took that little sultana off the top there too, because if they're exposed they can burn. So just if you've got any exposed raisins or sultanas on the top, just pick them off. And I just gently push that down. Wipe the bench, and now I'm just going to cover this for the final proof. This final proof was so fast because it was a very hot day. It was only 45 minutes before I had this in the oven. So I pretty much started preheating the oven straight away, knowing that it would move fast. You want to preheat your oven to 220 Celsius or 430 Fahrenheit. It's kind of jiggly, it's risen up, it's a bit hard to tell, but it's ready to go. It's now going into the oven. This is my baker. You don't have to bake yours covered, but it seems to work really well for me. So this roaster is preheated as well. If you don't have a roaster, just put it in the oven as it is, it'll be fine. So I bake it for 1 hour covered, but if you're baking yours uncovered, just check it after about 40 minutes. And here it is after the hour. It's got a lovely dark golden crust. I do like my breads to be well cooked. A little bit of trouble getting it out of the tin there. That's okay. Here we go. It's a bit of a brick, this one, but I'm happy with it. I like it. I love the shape of that little tin. And here we are the next morning for the final cut. I was pretty happy with it. I think if I had used more water, I may have got a more open crumb. Also, baking this as a free-form loaf would have got a more open crumb as well. But this is really what you can expect from a 100% whole grain loaf with a bit of khorasan in it, and fruit and cinnamon and other things. And also when you mix your loaves in a stand mixer, you do tend to get a more finer crumb. So there it is. I'm really happy with that, and it passed the taste test as well. It was quite delicious. The aroma is outstanding. Obviously this one's not sweetened, but it was sweet enough just with that fruit, I think. Very nice. Very happy with it. Thanks everyone. I hope that was interesting or helpful to some of you. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'd love to hear, and I'm curious to know what other people might do with a loaf like this, or how you might prepare it differently. You can all help me too. Thanks everyone. See you next time. Bye.